I was staring at a gold-plated welcome sign for my best friend's wedding reception, a celebration I had not been invited to. The sign stood near the entrance of the Grand Solstice Hotel's main ballroom. It read, "Welcome to the wedding celebration of Tiffany and Jason." Elegant white orchids draped over the polished metal frame. I stood a few feet away, holding a simple paper coffee cup, dressed in a plain beige cashmere sweater and comfortable loafers. I didn't look like the kind of person who belonged in a luxury venue, which was exactly how I preferred it. I was at the hotel for a weekend corporate retreat. Over the past 5 years, I had built a highly successful financial consulting firm. My life was stable, quiet, and secure. I didn't wear designer logos or carry flashy bags. I kept my wealth private because I valued peace over attention. Tiffany and I had been best friends since college. We shared dorm rooms, late-night study sessions, and endless conversations about our futures. But as we grew older, our paths split. She became obsessed with appearances, curated social media feeds, and the illusion of a perfect life. I focused on building a solid foundation. 2 months ago, our communication simply stopped. She stopped answering my texts. My calls went straight to voicemail. When I asked our mutual friend, Madison, if something was wrong, she gave vague excuses about Tiffany being stressed with wedding planning. Then, the wedding invitations were mailed out. I never received one. I didn't argue. I didn't demand answers. If people want to walk out of your life, the most dignified thing you can do is hold the door for them. Now, looking at the ballroom entrance, the reality settled in. I wasn't just forgotten, I was intentionally excluded. As I turned to walk toward the elevators, the ballroom doors opened. Madison stepped out in a shimmering bridesmaid gown, holding a clipboard. She looked up, and our eyes met. Her face froze. For a second, absolute panic flashed in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a tight, artificial smile. She didn't wave. She didn't say hello. She just turned around and hurried back inside. I pressed the button for the elevator, my expression completely neutral. I assumed they were just embarrassed to see me. I had no idea that their panic had nothing to do with guilt, and everything to do with a secret they thought I would never discover. Friendship rarely ends with a dramatic screaming match. It usually fades into unanswered texts and convenient excuses. Sitting in the quiet luxury of my suite, I opened my laptop to review a client contract. The room was spacious, booked under my company's name for the retreat. I liked the silence here. Downstairs, Tiffany was having the wedding of her dreams. Up here, I was doing what I always did, focusing on reality. I thought back to the last time I had seen Tiffany and Madison. We were at a casual lunch. Tiffany had spent the entire hour complaining about the cost of wedding vendors. She wanted a specific imported floral arrangement and a premium open bar, but Jason's family had put them on a strict budget. During that lunch, Madison had looked at my simple linen shirt and unbranded tote bag. She made a subtle joke about how I needed to upgrade my aesthetic if I ever wanted to attend high society events. I had smiled and paid the lunch bill for all of us, just like I usually did. They never asked how my business was doing. They just assumed that because I didn't look rich, I was still the same struggling student they knew years ago. I never corrected them. If someone's respect for you depends on the price tag of your clothes, their respect isn't worth having. I typed a few notes into my document, shaking off the memory. I was determined not to let their presence ruin my weekend. I had worked hard to get where I was, and I refused to waste my energy feeling sorry for myself. I had accepted my role as the invisible friend they had outgrown, but as the afternoon turned into evening, I realized I wasn't entirely separated from their event. I decided to head down to the hotel's mezzanine lounge to read. The lounge offered a clear view of the ground floor lobby and the entrance to the main ballroom. I wanted a quiet corner, a cup of tea, and some time away from screens. I found a secluded armchair behind a row of decorative bamboo plants. From here, I could hear the faint sound of a string quartet warming up. The guests were beginning to arrive, dressed in expensive tuxedos and evening gowns. I watched them pass by, feeling entirely detached from the spectacle. Then, I saw Tiffany. She was in her white gown, laughing and holding a glass of champagne. She looked perfect. I took a sip of my tea, feeling completely at peace with my absence from her life. But that peace was about to be broken by a single vibration in my pocket. The glowing screen of my phone shattered the quiet of my corner, displaying the logo of my primary bank. I rarely receive phone calls from this specific financial institution. I managed my accounts digitally, and my profile was flagged as a high net worth individual, meaning they only reached out if something required immediate attention. I placed my tea on the table and answered the call. "Good evening. Is this Claire?" A calm, professional voice asked. "Speaking," I replied. "Claire, my name is Kevin from the Fraud Prevention Department. We are calling regarding some highly unusual activity on your primary credit card ending in 4092. Are you currently attempting to process multiple high-value transactions?" I frowned, looking down at my simple leather wallet resting next to my laptop. "No, I haven't used that card all day." "I see," Kevin said, his tone turning slightly more serious. "We have received 5 separate charge requests in the last hour. Because they occurred rapidly and the total exceeds your usual daily spending pattern, our automated system placed a temporary hold on the account. I need to verify these charges with you." "Read them to me, please," I said quietly. "First charge, Grand Solstice event, catering, for the amount of $18,500. Second charge, Lux Botanical Designs, for $9,200. Third charge, Solstice Premium Bar Services, for $6,000. Fourth charge, Elite Photography, for $4,500. And a final pending charge for a bridal suite upgrade of $1,200. I sat frozen. The numbers echoed in my head. The total was nearly $40,000. I looked through the glass railing of the mezzanine, down toward the ballroom entrance. The floral arrangements framing the doors were extravagant. Waiters were carrying trays of premium champagne. Everything matched the names Kevin had just read to me. "Claire," Kevin asked after a moment of silence, "are you familiar with these vendors?" My heart beat a little faster, but my voice remained steady. "I know the venue, but I did not authorize a single one of these payments." "Understood, ma," Kevin said efficiently. "We will convert the temporary hold into a hard freeze. None of these transactions will clear. We will also reverse the initial pending amounts and issue a new card to your home address immediately." "Thank you, Kevin," I said. "Please ensure that every single one of those vendors is notified that the payment method was unauthorized. The system will automatically issue payment declined codes to their merchant terminals within the next few minutes," he confirmed. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. The string quartet downstairs started playing a lively tune. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ballroom, as a cold, undeniable truth settled over me. A single memory clicked into place, sharper than the edge of a paper cut. How did Tiffany have my credit card information? I hadn't handed her my wallet. And I certainly hadn't offered to pay for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. I closed my eyes and retraced my steps over the past year, digging through old emails and shared plans. Then I remembered. 14 months ago, back when we were still close, Tiffany, Madison, and I had planned a weekend trip to a vineyard. Tiffany had volunteered to handle the bookings to keep everything organized. The rental property required a large deposit, and Tiffany claimed her card was maxed out. Madison said she didn't have the funds until her next paycheck. Without hesitating, I had offered to put the deposit on my card. I sent Tiffany the card number, expiration date, and security code in a secure text message. She booked the trip, and we eventually split the remaining costs. I had completely forgotten about it. I trusted her. She must have saved the information. When her wedding budget fell short, she didn't cancel her extravagant plans. She didn't ask her fiancé's family for more money. Instead, she quietly typed my card details into the vendor payment portals, assuming I was too naive, too disorganized, or too passive to notice the charges until it was too late. She probably thought that by the time I saw my monthly statement, the wedding would be over, and I would be too soft to demand the money back. She thought I was just a walking wallet. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I watched the red, declined statuses populate one by one under my recent transactions. The catering, the flowers, the bar, the photographer. I didn't feel the urge to cry. I didn't feel the need to storm downstairs and scream at her in front of her guests. Anger is a loud, messy emotion that gives the other person a chance to defend themselves. I didn't want to argue. I simply wanted the reality of her choices to catch up with her. I took a quiet breath, smoothed the sleeves of my sweater, and opened my laptop again. I had work to do. I decided I wouldn't leave the mezzanine. I would sit right here, drink my tea, and let the hotel's merchant terminals do the talking. Down in the lobby, the guests were laughing, holding up their glasses for a toast. The illusion was perfect. But an illusion built on stolen money has a very short lifespan. I checked my watch. The vendor payment system updated every 15 minutes. The countdown had already begun. You can always tell when panic sets into a room. The music stays loud, but the smiles turn rigid. From my vantage point on the mezzanine, I had a perfect view of the ballroom's glass doors. For the first 30 minutes, everything flowed smoothly. Waiters glided through the crowd with trays of appetizers. The photographer flashed his camera, capturing perfect, curated moments. Tiffany was the center of attention, glowing with the satisfaction of a woman who had everything she wanted. Then, the shift happened. I noticed a man in a dark, tailored suit holding a tablet, walking quickly toward the ballroom. His badge identified him as the hotel's event director. Let's call him Andrew. His posture was stiff, and his face held the polite but firm expression of a man dealing with a massive problem. Andrew bypassed the guests and headed straight for the bridal table. He leaned in and whispered something to Madison, the maid of honor. Madison's smile vanished. She looked at Andrew, shook her head rapidly, and pulled her phone out of her clutch. She tapped the screen frantically, then turned to Tiffany. Even from a distance, I could see the color drain from Tiffany's face. She handed her champagne glass to her new husband, Jason, whispering an excuse, and followed Andrew and Madison out into the private alcove near the lobby. I couldn't hear the conversation, but body language speaks louder than words. Andrew was showing them his tablet. He was pointing to the screen, clearly explaining that the massive payments processed earlier that day had just bounced back with fraud alerts. The vendors required valid payment before the main dinner service could begin. Tiffany was shaking her head, waving her hands in a dismissive gesture, likely insisting it was just a bank error. She pulled a credit card from Madison's purse and handed it to Andrew. Andrew swiped it on his mobile terminal. A red light flashed. Declined. Madison's card didn't have the limit to cover a fraction of the cost. Tiffany looked frantic. She pulled out her phone and started making a call. My own phone, sitting on the table next to my laptop, remained silent. She wasn't calling me. She was too proud, or too scared, to admit what she had done directly to my face. Inside the ballroom, the guests were beginning to notice the absence of the bride. The waitstaff, previously hovering with trays of hot food, had suddenly disappeared into the kitchen. The open bar was quietly closed, the bartenders placing small, temporarily closed signs on the counter. The luxury experience was shutting down, piece by piece. Tiffany stood in the alcove, her perfect wedding unraveling in real time. Then she looked up. Her eyes scanned the upper floors of the hotel lobby, searching for a solution, and that was when she saw me, sitting quietly on the mezzanine, looking straight back at her. A desperate person doesn't look for solutions. They look for a scapegoat. The moment Tiffany locked eyes with me, her panic mutated into anger. She whispered something to Madison, and the two of them marched toward the grand staircase. Andrew, the event director, followed closely behind them, refusing to let the situation slip out of his control. I didn't move. I slowly closed my laptop, took a final sip of my tea, and waited. They reached the mezzanine a moment later. Tiffany's dress was heavy, making her breathing labored. Madison looked furious. "What are you doing here?" Tiffany demanded, her voice a harsh whisper to avoid drawing attention from the guests below. "I have a corporate retreat this weekend," I answered calmly, not raising my voice. "It's a public hotel." "Did you do this?" Madison hissed, stepping forward. "Did you cancel the card?" I looked at Madison, then at Tiffany. If you mean the credit card that was fraudulently charged for nearly $40,000 an hour ago, yes, I reported it to the fraud department. Fraud, Tiffany gasped, her eyes wide with fake disbelief. See, Claire, it was a mistake. The portal must have saved your info from the vineyard trip. You didn't have to freeze the whole account and ruin my wedding. It wasn't a mistake. Tiffany, I replied smoothly. The portal requires the CVV code to be re-entered for every new vendor. You typed it in 5 separate times. Tiffany's mouth opened, but no words came out. Andrew stepped forward, his professional demeanor slipping slightly. Excuse me, ladies. Am I to understand that the payment method provided for this event does not belong to the bride? It's a misunderstanding. Tiffany snapped at him. She turned back to me, her voice dropping into a desperate, pleading tone. Claire, please just call your bank. Tell them you authorized it. I will pay you back, I swear. If you don't unfreeze it right now, they're going to cancel the dinner. Jason's parents are out there. No, I said quietly. No, Madison echoed, crossing her arms. Are you serious right now? You have plenty of money. You don't even spend it. You wear the same sweaters every year. You owe us for putting up with your boring lifestyle all through college. Just pay the damn bill. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend my clothes or my lifestyle. I just looked at them, seeing them clearly for the first time in my life. You didn't invite me to the wedding, I stated simply. You just invited my credit card, and my credit card is declining the invitation. The loudest sound in a quiet room is the rustle of a printed invoice, exposing a lie. Tiffany's face turned bright red. I didn't invite you because you wouldn't fit in. Look at you. You would have brought down the whole aesthetic of the bridal party. But we're still friends. Claire, friends help each other. Friends do not commit credit card fraud, I corrected her softly. Andrew cleared his throat. Claire, he said, addressing me with newfound respect. Realizing I was the actual account holder, I apologize for the disturbance. However, as the venue management, I must secure payment for the services rendered. If this was unauthorized, I need to know immediately so we can halt all operations. It was completely unauthorized. I told him. I unlocked my phone, opened my email, and turned the screen toward him. It displayed the official notice from my bank fraud alert, card frozen, investigation pending. Andrew nodded grimly. He turned to Tiffany. Ma'am, I need a valid card in your name right now to cover the $18,500 catering bill and the $6,000 bar tab, or we will not serve the main course, and the authorities may need to be involved regarding the fraudulent attempts. I don't have it, Tiffany whispered, her voice cracking. Jason's family paid for the dress and the venue rental. I was supposed to cover the rest. I don't have the money. Then I have no choice, Andrew said, his voice devoid of sympathy. I am shutting down the event services. Claire, you can't do this to me, Tiffany cried, tears finally spilling over her carefully applied makeup. It's my wedding day. Everyone is watching. I'm not doing anything to you. Tiffany, I said, picking up my laptop bag. I'm simply refusing to be stolen from. You made these choices. Madison tried to grab my arm. You're just jealous. You're a bitter, lonely woman who can't stand seeing someone else happy. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve until she slowly pulled it back. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jealous. I just felt incredibly tired of pretending these people were worth my time. Have a good evening, I said evenly. I turned my back on them and walked toward the elevators. I didn't look back. Even when Tiffany started sobbing loudly, the sound echoing off the marble walls of the mezzanine. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when a lie runs out of oxygen. I took the elevator back to my suite, locked the door, and set my bags down. I didn't rush to the window to watch the fallout, but the architecture of the grand solstice meant the courtyard below my balcony was right next to the ballroom's outdoor terrace. About 20 minutes later, the noise began. I stepped onto my balcony, the cool evening air brushing against my face. Down below, the perfectly orchestrated reception had collapsed into chaos. The catering staff were wheeling the covered food carts back toward the kitchen. The bartenders were packing away the premium liquors. The guests were standing in confused clusters. I saw Jason, the groom, standing near the edge of the terrace. He looked furious. Tiffany was standing in front of him, crying hysterically, while Madison waved her hands, trying to explain away the disaster. Jason's mother, an elegant woman in a navy dress, walked over to Andrew. I could see Andrew shaking his head, pointing at his tablet. The truth was out. The wealthy bride, who had demanded nothing but the best, had attempted to pay for it with a stolen credit card. Jason turned away from Tiffany, burying his face in his hands. He hadn't known. He had trusted the woman he was marrying, entirely unaware that her obsession with aesthetics hid a mountain of financial lies. I watched the scene without a drop of satisfaction. It wasn't a victory. It was just a tragedy of their own making. I had spent years being the reliable friend, the one who paid for lunches, covered deposits, and stayed quiet when insulted. I had thought that being generous would make them respect me. I realized then that generosity without boundaries is just self-destruction. By 9 p.m., the ballroom was nearly empty. The guests had murmured their awkward goodbyes and left to find dinner elsewhere. The string quartet had packed up their instruments. The beautiful white orchids drooped over the unlit entrance. My phone vibrated on the desk inside. It was a text from an unknown number. "You ruined my life. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. I blocked the number, closed the balcony door, and drew the heavy curtains. I took a hot shower, ordered room service just for myself, and went to sleep in the quietest room in the hotel. An empty lobby in the early morning holds the ghosts of the previous night's disasters. I woke up early, packed my small suitcase, and headed down to the lobby to check out before my corporate meetings began. The hotel was quiet. The grand ballroom doors were closed and locked, stripped of their floral decorations. As I approached the front desk, I saw two figures sitting on a velvet sofa near the valet stand. It was Tiffany and Madison. They looked exhausted. Tiffany's hair was messy and she was wearing a simple tracksuit, a stark contrast to the glamorous bride from the day before. Madison saw me first. She nudged Tiffany, who looked up with bloodshot eyes. To my surprise, Tiffany stood up and walked toward me. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked entirely broken. "Claire," she said, her voice raspy. I handed my room key to the receptionist. "Good morning, Tiffany." "Jason left," she whispered. "He went to his parents' house. He said he needs time to think. His family is humiliated. The hotel is threatening to press charges if the outstanding setup fees aren't paid by noon." I waited for her to finish. I didn't offer a tissue. I didn't offer a comforting word. "I know I messed up," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was just so desperate. The wedding got out of control, and I couldn't bear the thought of looking like a failure. Please, I know you froze the card, but you have the money. Could you just loan it to me, a formal loan? I'll sign a contract. I'll pay you back every cent." Madison stood a few steps behind her, looking at the floor, no longer making snide comments about my clothes. "No," I said quietly. "Claire, please, they might arrest me." "You should have thought about the consequences before you typed in my security code," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "You didn't just steal money. Tiffany, you stole my trust. You treated me like I was nothing more than an ATM you didn't even have to look at." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are, but," I said, picking up my tote bag, "but you're only sorry because you got caught. If the payment had gone through, you would have enjoyed your perfect night and let me deal with the mess." I turned back to the receptionist. "My company covers the room, but please put my room service on this card." I handed her a different heavy metal credit card. The receptionist swiped it. "All set, ma'am. Thank you for staying with us." I looked at Tiffany one last time. "Good luck." "Tiffany." I turned and walked out the glass doors toward my waiting car. Closure rarely comes wrapped in an apology. It usually arrives as a quiet morning where you finally breathe freely. 2 weeks later, the bank's fraud investigation officially closed because I had reported the unauthorized charges immediately, and the hotel system logged the IP addresses and signatures. I was completely cleared of any liability. The temporary freeze was lifted, and my financial life returned to normal. The fallout for Tiffany was entirely different. Word travels fast in social circles. Without my prompting, mutual acquaintances learned exactly why the lavish solstice wedding had abruptly ended before dinner. The hotel forced Tiffany and Madison to cover the remaining setup fees by draining their personal savings and taking out high-interest personal loans. Jason officially filed for an annulment a month later. He stated he could not build a life with someone who lied so easily. Madison, trying to distance herself from the scandal, stopped talking to Tiffany altogether. The aesthetic they had fought so hard to protect had shattered completely. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I simply moved forward. I was sitting in my office overlooking the city, reviewing a new investment portfolio. I was wearing a simple white blouse and my favorite comfortable shoes. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was an email from a new client, praising my firm's careful and strategic planning. I smiled and typed a brief, professional reply. For years, I had believed that being a good friend meant making myself smaller so others could feel big. I had let people mistake my modesty for weakness and my generosity for foolishness, but standing in that hotel lobby, refusing to save someone who had happily thrown me away, I finally understood my own value. Real wealth isn't about the labels you wear, the parties you throw, or the aesthetics you project to the world. Real wealth is having the absolute freedom to walk away from people who don't respect you. I didn't need to yell, or scream, or prove my worth to anyone. I had the truth. I had my independence, and I had my peace. And as I looked out at the city skyline, I knew that no one would ever be able to take that from me again.